What if everything you've been told about success, happiness, and fulfillment was empty? Now, I'm not just talking about the richest or smartest people we know today, figures like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Donald Trump. If these titans of industry were asked to explain the meaning of life, do you think they'd have answers that could heal your soul, transform your heart, or give your life true purpose? I doubt it, because wealth, influence, and intelligence alone can't answer life's deepest questions. But Ecclesiastes introduces us to someone who can. He was the wisest man in the Bible, a king who had everything: knowledge, power, and a treasure that could satisfy any desire. And yet, he looked out over his achievements, over all he had built, and said something shocking. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. This is the voice of King Solomon, a man who saw the world as it really was, who tasted every pleasure and pursued every ambition, only to conclude that without God, it was all like vapor in the wind. Imagine if you could sit down with him, listen as he pours out the lessons he learned at the height of his wealth and wisdom. The Book of Ecclesiastes is that conversation. In this book, Solomon exposes the emptiness of life's illusions, stripping away the superficial promises of happiness, wealth, and success. He invites us to ask ourselves the hard questions. What am I really living for? What will last beyond my accomplishments and ambitions? Ecclesiastes isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a mirror for today's world, challenging every one of us to rethink where we're finding meaning. We live in a culture that says just achieve a little more, buy a little more, do a little more. But Solomon's voice cuts through the noise. He's calling us to a truth that can change our lives forever, a truth about what really matters. If I were you, I'd come back to this message every morning. I'd listen until these words shape the way I think, the way I live, and the choices I make. Because once Solomon's wisdom seeps into your soul, you can't walk away unchanged. The lessons here aren't just to inspire, they're meant to transform you, to align your life with God's truth, to give you a foundation that lasts beyond the passing pleasures of this world. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Solomon meant by hevel, that life without God is as fleeting as a breath. And if these words resonate with you, don't keep them to yourself. Share this video from deep Bible stories with someone who needs to hear it. Let's bring as many people as we can into the wisdom that's here, wisdom that can bring healing, purpose, and clarity. So, are you ready to uncover the secrets of a life that truly matters? Let's dive into Ecclesiastes and discover the wisdom of Solomon, a wisdom that transcends wealth and intellect and speaks directly to the heart. Ecclesiastes stands as one of the most enigmatic and thought-provoking books in the Bible, wrestling with questions that have haunted humanity for centuries. Unlike other books that overflow with divine promises, miracles, or prophecies, Ecclesiastes confronts us with life's stark realities, its brevity, its mystery, and at times its seeming futility. Written by a figure known as the teacher or Koheleth, traditionally believed to be King Solomon, Ecclesiastes is an unflinching look into the depths of human existence and the pursuits we cling to in search of meaning. Ecclesiastes is part of the wisdom literature in the Bible, standing alongside books like Proverbs, Job, and Psalms. But unlike Proverbs, which lays out principles for righteous living, Ecclesiastes confronts life's messier side, presenting observations that are, at times, disheartening, even contradictory to conventional wisdom. Everything is meaningless, the teacher declares repeatedly. Yet this book isn't an expression of hopelessness. It's a call to awaken, a cry to stop clinging to illusions and to confront reality with unfiltered honesty. Imagine Solomon in his later years, after achieving monumental success, standing before the people with a lifetime of knowledge and experience. As the teacher, he reflects on his wealth, wisdom, and indulgences. Yet in all these accomplishments he finds only emptiness. Ecclesiastes 2:11 captures his haunting realization. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. This is not the voice of a pessimist, it's the voice of a realist who wants us to understand that no earthly achievement can fulfill the deepest longings of the human soul. Ecclesiastes speaks to the universal experiences of life, the endless cycles of work, the disappointments, the fleeting joys, and the realities of aging and mortality. The teacher observes that human life is cyclical. Generations come and go, yet the world remains the same. The sun rises and sets, the rivers flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. Everything, he says, is repetitive, predictable, and ultimately empty if viewed apart from God's purpose. This cyclical nature of existence brings a sobering clarity. Nothing under the sun is truly new or lasting on its own. Ecclesiastes confronts us with a world that keeps turning, indifferent to our ambitions or achievements. In his quest for meaning, Solomon experiments with pleasure, wealth, and wisdom. He amasses riches, pursues knowledge, indulges in every possible pleasure, hoping to find satisfaction. Yet, in all of it, he finds hevel, that Hebrew word meaning vapor or breath. It signifies something insubstantial, fleeting, something that cannot be grasped or held. Ecclesiastes 2:10-11 records his conclusion. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. For Solomon, who had everything, this wasn't a simple observation. It was a painful revelation. But Ecclesiastes isn't just about despair. It's about reframing our lives around eternal truths rather than temporal illusions. The teacher's message echoes the sentiments found in the Book of Job, where Job, too, confronts life's inexplicable suffering and human limitations. Job, however, cries out to God for answers, while Ecclesiastes invites us to find humility in the mystery, to embrace the limits of our understanding. The phrase, under the sun, appears frequently in Ecclesiastes, signaling the teacher's perspective. He's evaluating life strictly from a human point of view, what can be seen, measured, or experienced on earth without considering the divine. This phrase captures the reality of life, lived without God's wisdom at its center. Life under the sun is full of toil, pleasure, and endless cycles, but ultimately empty when disconnected from the Creator. Ecclesiastes challenges us to ask, what am I living for? Are we building lives rooted in God's eternal purposes, or are we chasing after the fleeting and superficial? And so, Ecclesiastes at its core is a wake-up call. Its message is that while life under the sun may be empty and fleeting, life under God brings hope, purpose, and meaning. The teacher encourages us to let go of our illusions of control, to face the fragility of life, and to embrace a deeper God-centered perspective. Ecclesiastes 3:11 reveals this truth beautifully. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. We are created with an eternal longing that nothing in this world can satisfy, and only by turning to God can we begin to find true meaning. Ecclesiastes asks one of the most timeless and universal questions: what is the meaning of life? It's a question that has haunted philosophers, poets, kings, and everyday people. Solomon, who had every earthly pleasure and achievement within his reach, explored every path to fulfillment, every road that promised satisfaction. And yet, in Ecclesiastes, we find him saying, I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Ecclesiastes 1:14. Imagine the man who had it all, the wealthiest, wisest king, saying that life, in its pursuits and pleasures, is meaningless. This isn't a quick judgment. Solomon dedicated himself to uncovering the purpose behind every endeavor. He built magnificent buildings, amassed great wealth, explored pleasure, gained unparalleled wisdom, and yet came back to this sobering reality. Life under the sun, life lived solely from a human perspective, leads to nothing lasting. But why does Solomon say this? What does he mean by under the sun? Ecclesiastes uses this phrase repeatedly to describe a life limited to earthly experiences, a life that excludes God. When we live without reference to our Creator, Solomon says, we end up chasing empty promises. The pursuit of pleasure, wealth, fame, all of it, becomes like trying to hold on to the wind, slipping through our fingers and leaving us hollow. Think about the modern world's version of this pursuit. We're told that meaning is found in the next big accomplishment, the newest experience, the latest trend. But Ecclesiastes tells us that these things, while captivating, cannot fill the void. Solomon warns us, if we try to find meaning in things under the sun, we will come up empty. Each accomplishment will leave us thirsting for more. Each pleasure will be momentary, and each high will be followed by an inevitable low. In Ecclesiastes 2:10-11, Solomon says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Here, Solomon reveals his relentless pursuit of every pleasure and indulgence, and yet even with all his wealth and power, he found no lasting satisfaction. So, if life's meaning isn't found in pleasure or achievement, where does Solomon say it lies? Ecclesiastes ultimately points us to a truth beyond ourselves. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Ecclesiastes 12:13. After all his searching, Solomon realizes that true purpose, true meaning, comes from living in reverence toward God. It's a life that looks beyond the temporary and seeks the eternal, a life that honors God above all else. This isn't a call to abandon joy, love, or passion. Instead, Solomon shows us that all of these things are gifts from God to be enjoyed in the right way, in the right perspective, with Him at the center. Ecclesiastes 3:11 tells us, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. There is a purpose, a beauty, in everything God has created, but it is only found when we see life as He intended, rooted in a relationship with Him, anchored in eternal truth, and free from the empty cycle of striving. Consider this. We live in a world where so many people feel like they're on a treadmill, running and running, but never arriving. Perhaps you felt this too, the need to accomplish, the drive to succeed, the desire for approval, only to realize that each milestone quickly fades, leaving you wanting more. Ecclesiastes speaks directly to this feeling. It invites us to step off the treadmill, to stop chasing the wind, and to discover that life's true meaning is not in the temporary, but in the eternal. It's in knowing and honoring God, whose purposes for us reach beyond anything we could achieve on our own. This message is powerful because it's so countercultural. The world tells us that we are enough on our own, that fulfillment is found in being true to ourselves or living our truth. But Ecclesiastes offers a different view. We are only fulfilled when we are true to our Creator. Life gains depth, meaning and joy when we live in the purpose God has set for us, rooted not in temporary pleasure, but in eternal truth. So let me ask you, are you searching for meaning in life? Have you found yourself reaching for something, an accomplishment, a possession, a relationship, only to find it doesn't satisfy? Solomon's words in Ecclesiastes are a reminder to look higher, to seek purpose not in what we accomplish under the sun, but in the one who made us, the one who is above all. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you acquire, something is still missing? Ecclesiastes confronts this unsettling feeling head-on. Here, Solomon, one of the wealthiest, most accomplished men in history, confesses that his countless achievements, his wealth, his very legacy ultimately left him empty. He writes, "Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun." Ecclesiastes 2:11. It's shocking, isn't it? The man who had everything says it amounted to nothing. Solomon's words resonate across centuries, exposing the truth that so many of us know but often ignore, that pursuing satisfaction in the things of this world leaves us unfulfilled. The status, the promotions, the wealth, the accomplishments, they're fleeting, momentary, like trying to grasp smoke in our hands. Solomon likens it to striving after the wind. We chase it with all our might, but it slips away the moment we reach for it. Imagine Solomon at the peak of his achievements, looking over his vast kingdom, his wealth and his treasures. He had done it all, built it all, and yet he found himself asking, "Is this it?" What more could a man like Solomon desire? He had palaces, gardens, vineyards, servants, wisdom and influence. He had everything, yet he discovered a profound emptiness because none of it could satisfy his soul's deepest needs. Solomon realized that even if we own the world, if our lives are spent in pursuit of temporary gains, we're missing the point. Ecclesiastes 5:10 captures this beautifully. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This, too, is meaningless. Solomon is reminding us of a truth we see every day. The desire for more is insatiable. When we anchor our purpose in worldly pursuits, we enter a cycle that never ends, constantly striving for the next achievement, the next possession, the next level. But no matter how much we accumulate, our hearts still feel that hollow ache, that longing for something more permanent, more meaningful. Consider how relevant this message is today. We live in a society that praises wealth, that glorifies ambition, that measures worth by achievement. Social media highlights only the successes, the luxury, the achievements, feeding a cycle that convinces us we'll only find value by reaching the next milestone. But Solomon, the man who had it all, warns us that this pursuit is a mirage. It's a chase that leaves us thirsting for more, promising happiness but delivering emptiness. But here's where Ecclesiastes offers an alternative perspective. Solomon's wisdom in Ecclesiastes doesn't deny the value of work or the joy of accomplishment. Instead, it reframes them. Ecclesiastes 3:12-13 says, "I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man." Solomon's point isn't that work, wealth, or pleasure are bad. Rather, when we view them as ends in themselves, they fall short. But when we see them as gifts from God to be enjoyed within the framework of his purpose, they gain true meaning. This is the core truth Ecclesiastes wants us to grasp. Lasting fulfillment comes not from what we possess, but from the one who gives it all. God has designed work, joy, and even wealth to be enjoyed. but only when they're experienced as part of a life surrendered to Him. It's like Solomon is urging us, don't make these things your God, your goal. They will never satisfy that way. Make God your center, and you will see everything in a new light. We see this wisdom reflected in the words of Jesus as well. In Matthew 6:19-21, He tells us, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus and Solomon both warn us that investing our hearts in earthly pursuits leads to heartbreak. Only what's done with eternity in mind will truly last. So, what does it look like to live with this perspective? It means working hard, yes, but not letting work define us. It means earning money, yes, but not letting money own us. It means appreciating achievements, but remembering that they're not the source of our worth. When we live with God at the center, worldly pursuits lose their grip on us. They become tools we use, blessings to enjoy, rather than chains that bind us. Let me ask you, where are you investing your energy, your time, your heart? Are you chasing after the wind, or are you rooted in something that will last? Solomon's words challenge us to examine our lives, to see through the illusions of worldly pursuits, and to find our purpose and value in God. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. Ecclesiastes 3:1. These words are among the most famous lines in Ecclesiastes. They carry a profound truth. Every season, every moment of our lives has its own purpose. Solomon, who wrestled deeply with the meaning of life, brings us to a realization about time that is both humbling and freeing. He reveals that we are not in control of time. God is. There is a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot. Life seasons unfold as part of a divine design, and each one brings its own lessons, its own joys, and its own sorrows. Solomon begins Ecclesiastes 3 with a list of contrasts, capturing the full range of human experience, joy and sorrow, building and tearing down, speaking and staying silent, loving and letting go. These are not just random occurrences, they are moments orchestrated by God. Solomon reminds us that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves, a tapestry of life woven by the Creator, where each thread, each season has its place. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes calls us to embrace each season with faith, trusting that God knows the purpose behind every joy and every struggle. Consider the words of Ecclesiastes 3:11, where Solomon says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Here, Solomon touches on a mystery that resonates deeply within all of us. We sense that life has a larger meaning, that there's something beyond the limits of time. Yet we cannot fully grasp it. God has placed eternity in our hearts, a longing for something lasting, something eternal. And yet our view is limited. We can't see the whole picture, but God can. He knows the end from the beginning, and in His time He makes everything beautiful. Think about the seasons in your own life. The times of joy, the times of grief, the times of waiting, and the times of growth. Each season brings something unique, something necessary for your journey. Solomon teaches us that we're not meant to rush through life, wishing one season away to get to the next. Instead, we're called to be present, to learn from every moment, to trust that God is working in ways we may not yet understand. Today, in a world that values speed, productivity, and instant gratification, it's easy to feel impatient. We often want the next season to arrive before the current one has ended. We want answers, we want change, and we want it now. But Ecclesiastes challenges this mindset, urging us to accept that some things unfold only in God's timing. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, some parts of our lives need time to reach their full potential. The waiting, the growing, the refining, all are part of God's purpose. Ecclesiastes 7:14 offers a profound insight into accepting both the good and the bad in life. When times are good, be happy, but when times are bad, consider this: God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. Solomon is telling us that every season, both the joyful and the difficult, comes from God's hand. He is with us in every moment, shaping our lives through both triumphs and trials. This perspective doesn't mean we deny pain or hardship. Rather, it means we trust that God is using each season for His purpose, that He's present even in our struggles. This wisdom is echoed in the Book of James, where we're reminded to consider it pure joy when we face trials, because these trials develop perseverance, which leads to maturity and completeness. James 1:2-4. Both Ecclesiastes and James remind us that seasons of hardship aren't without purpose. They are part of God's refining process, a way of building our faith, drawing us closer to Him, and preparing us for what lies ahead. But Ecclesiastes doesn't only dwell on the difficult seasons, it also calls us to rejoice in the blessings God gives us. Ecclesiastes 3:12-13 tells us, "I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God." Solomon urges us to find joy in the simple things, to see God's blessings in the daily rhythms of life. Life isn't just about enduring difficult seasons. It's also about savoring the good ones, enjoying the gifts God provides, and recognizing His hand in the beauty around us. So what does this mean for us today? It means learning to live in the present moment, to trust that God's timing is perfect, and to embrace each season as part of His plan. It means releasing control, surrendering our impatience, and allowing God to lead us through every phase of life. When we acknowledge that our lives are held in His hands, we find peace, even in uncertainty, even in waiting. We learn to live in harmony with God's timing, no longer striving to force things to happen, but instead resting in the knowledge that His timing is always right. Are you in a season of waiting, of growth, of struggle, or of joy? What might God be teaching you at this time? Solomon's words invite us to consider our current season and to trust that God is at work even when we can't see it. Each season, no matter how it feels, has meaning. Whether you're in a time of laughter or mourning, of building or letting go, God is there with you, guiding you, shaping you, making everything beautiful in its time. If God is just, then why do the wicked seem to thrive while the righteous struggle? Why do those who defy God's ways often live in comfort, while those who seek Him face hardship and suffering? In Ecclesiastes, Solomon confronts these questions head-on. He doesn't shy away from the tension. Instead, he digs deeply into this mystery, one that has perplexed believers and skeptics alike for centuries. Solomon's words are stark. In Ecclesiastes 8:14, he observes, "There is something else meaningless that occurs on earth, the righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve." Imagine Solomon, the wisest king, deeply troubled by this reality, seeing good people, people who fear God, facing pain and injustice, while those who ignore God's commands seem to prosper. This wasn't just an observation for Solomon. It was a painful contradiction that challenged his understanding of life and justice. We too feel the weight of this question, don't we? We see people who cheat, lie, and exploit others climbing to success, while those who act with integrity and compassion often face setbacks. It's easy to feel disillusioned, to wonder if living righteously is even worth it. But Solomon urges us to look beyond what we see under the sun. He invites us to see life from a broader perspective, a perspective that trusts in God's justice even when life seems unfair. One of Solomon's key insights is found in Ecclesiastes 3:17, where he says, "I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed." Solomon reminds us that while the scales of justice may seem off balance now, God's judgment will come. The injustices we witness are not overlooked by God. He sees, He knows, and in His time He will bring every action into account. The prosperity of the wicked and the suffering of the righteous are temporary realities, but God's justice is eternal. This idea resonates deeply with other parts of Scripture, where we're reminded that God's timing and justice are perfect, even when we can't see it. Psalm 37, 7-9 echoes this sentiment. "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land." The psalmist encourages us not to be consumed by the success of the wicked. Instead, we're called to hope in God, to trust that He is working, even when life appears unjust. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon also cautions against envying the wicked or losing heart in the face of their temporary success. Ecclesiastes 7:15 captures this tension. "In this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these, the righteous perishing in their righteousness and the wicked living long in their wickedness." Solomon points out that prosperity isn't proof of God's favor, nor is suffering proof of God's disapproval. He encourages us to live with integrity, regardless of life's apparent injustices, to remain faithful even when things seem upside down. The true reward of the righteous isn't found in earthly success, but in the peace of knowing we are aligned with God's will. Consider how countercultural this message is. Today, we're told that success is the ultimate goal, that wealth, power, and influence are signs of a life well lived. But Solomon, having experienced all these things, warns us not to measure our lives by worldly standards. He shows us that true meaning isn't found in external success, but in internal peace, in living a life rooted in God's truth rather than chasing temporary rewards. The wicked may appear to thrive, but their success is shallow, their joy is fleeting, and in the end, God's judgment awaits. Ecclesiastes 12:14 brings this message to a powerful conclusion. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Solomon assures us that God's justice will prevail. No injustice will go unaddressed, no evil will be ignored, and no righteous act will be forgotten. The suffering of the righteous and the prosperity of the wicked are temporary, but God's judgment is eternal. The very things that trouble us now, the unfairness, the imbalances, the questions, will one day be resolved by God Himself. And so, Solomon's wisdom in Ecclesiastes challenges us to live faithfully, not for temporary rewards, but for eternal truth. We may not understand why the righteous suffer or why the wicked prosper, but we can trust that God does. Our call is to remain steadfast, to trust in God's goodness, and to remember that He holds the final word over every life. Do you feel disillusioned by life's unfairness? Are you struggling with the question of why the wicked prosper? Solomon's words invite us to bring these frustrations to God, to trust that His justice, though it may seem delayed, will come. Our role is not to judge the wicked or despair over injustice, but to live faithfully, knowing that God sees and honors the lives of those who love Him. In a world that prizes knowledge and celebrates intelligence, Ecclesiastes presents a startling truth. Wisdom and knowledge don't always bring happiness. In fact, Solomon, who was granted unmatched wisdom by God himself, found that with great knowledge often comes sorrow, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Ecclesiastes 1:18. Imagine that. A man gifted with divine wisdom, someone who understood life's mysteries more deeply than anyone, declaring that his wisdom actually increased his grief. How could that be? We tend to believe that if we only knew more, if we could understand why things happen, then we'd find peace. We chase knowledge, thinking it will give us control over our lives, that it will protect us from pain or hardship. But Solomon discovered something unexpected. Wisdom reveals life's harsh realities, its injustices, its pains, and ultimately its mysteries that remain beyond human grasp. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he actually understood, and this realization weighed heavily on him. Ecclesiastes 1:16-17 gives us a glimpse into his struggle. I said to myself, "Look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge." Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom, and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this, too, is a chasing after the wind. Solomon's quest for knowledge led him to realize that many of life's mysteries, especially the big questions about suffering, justice, and the meaning of life, are beyond human understanding. He describes this pursuit as chasing after the wind, emphasizing that knowledge alone cannot provide lasting peace or fulfillment. This paradox resonates deeply in today's world, where information is more accessible than ever, yet true understanding feels increasingly out of reach. We live in an age where knowledge is constantly increasing, yet anxiety, depression, and feelings of emptiness are more common than ever. Solomon's words remind us that knowledge without God leads to disillusionment. When we rely solely on our own understanding, we're left with a sense of incompleteness, because human knowledge alone can never answer the eternal questions of life. We may know more facts, but facts alone don't give us wisdom, and they certainly don't provide peace. Solomon also explored wisdom and folly, comparing them to find out if human wisdom could offer more joy or peace. In Ecclesiastes 2:13-14, he writes, "I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both." While wisdom is certainly valuable and preferable to ignorance, Solomon recognized that wisdom alone cannot prevent life's tragedies. Both the wise and the foolish ultimately face death, and neither can control the mysteries of life. This realization led Solomon to conclude that while wisdom has its advantages, it's not the ultimate source of peace or security. He saw that wisdom in itself cannot shield us from suffering, nor does it guarantee understanding of God's plans. Ecclesiastes 8:17 captures his frustration. "Then I saw all that God has done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one can discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim they know, they cannot really comprehend it." Solomon admits that no matter how wise we become, God's ways remain beyond our reach. Human wisdom has its limits, and only God holds the full understanding of life's mysteries. This message is powerful. It reminds us that we cannot control life by understanding it fully. Knowledge and wisdom have limits, and when we try to find ultimate meaning in them, we end up feeling frustrated and empty. True wisdom, Solomon found, begins not with human knowledge, but with reverence for God. Proverbs 9:10 says it best. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." Solomon recognized that wisdom is only fulfilling when it points us to God, when it leads us to a humble acknowledgement that his ways are higher than our own. Ecclesiastes teaches us that the search for wisdom, when disconnected from God, leads to despair. But when connected to God, it brings peace. It's an invitation to surrender our need to know everything and to trust that God knows what we cannot. It's a call to humility, to recognize that our understanding is limited and to place our faith in the one who sees the full picture. Knowledge for its own sake can leave us empty, but knowledge that leads us to God brings life. In our own lives, we often find ourselves asking, why did this happen? Why do good people suffer? Why are there injustices that go unpunished? Solomon's wisdom teaches us that not every question has an answer we can comprehend. God's plans are deeper, his purposes higher. And rather than frustrate us, this truth can free us. We don't need to know everything because we know the one who does. So let me ask you, are you seeking answers that only God knows? Are you wrestling with questions that keep you from resting in him? Solomon's journey reminds us that our peace isn't found in knowing all the answers, but in knowing God. True wisdom comes when we accept the limits of human understanding and place our trust in God's infinite wisdom. In a world that often tells us more is better, Ecclesiastes offers a refreshing perspective. True wisdom lies in moderation and balance. Solomon, after experiencing the extremes of wealth, pleasure, work, and wisdom, came to a powerful realization. Life, he discovered, is best lived not in excess, but in balance, a balance that honors God and brings us true peace. Consider Ecclesiastes 7:16-18, where Solomon advises, "Do not be over-righteous, neither be over-wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be overwicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes." Here, Solomon is calling us to avoid the pitfalls of extremes, whether in religious zeal, reckless living, or the pursuit of knowledge. He knew from experience that both self-righteousness and foolishness lead to ruin. Instead, he advocates for a life that holds to the middle ground, a life guided by wisdom and rooted in reverence for God. Why does Solomon caution against extremes? Because both excess and deprivation can lead us away from God. When we pursue pleasure without restraint, we become slaves to our desires. And when we seek wisdom or righteousness to the point of pride or self-reliance, we risk falling into self-righteousness, believing that we can earn our worth through knowledge or virtue. Moderation and balance bring us back to humility, reminding us that we are not the center of the universe. God is. Living with balance means enjoying God's gifts without letting them control us, using wisdom without placing it above God's guidance, and pursuing righteousness without self-righteousness. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 also reflects this balanced perspective, as Solomon lists life's many contrasting seasons. A time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Each of these experiences has its place, and wisdom lies in embracing each season without letting anyone define us. Life's beauty is in its variety, and a balanced life means understanding that both joy and sorrow are part of God's design. Solomon's view reminds us that we're not meant to cling only to comfort, nor should we chase only hardship as though suffering brings us closer to God. Instead, we're called to live each season fully, recognizing that God's purpose spans the highs and lows. This message challenges today's culture, where we often find ourselves chasing the next big thing. We're encouraged to push limits, to live with excess, to maximize every moment and experience to the fullest. But Solomon warns us that this way of life, though appealing, leads to burnout and dissatisfaction. Ecclesiastes 5:10 speaks directly to the endless pursuit of wealth. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This, too, is meaningless. The drive for more wealth, more success, more pleasure ultimately leaves us feeling empty. Solomon's wisdom invites us to take a step back, to see the value of enough, and to appreciate the simple, balanced life as a gift from God. The Book of Proverbs, also attributed to Solomon, echoes this call to moderation and contentment. Proverbs 38:9 offers a prayer of balance. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, Who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. This prayer reflects a heart that understands the danger of both extremes. Too much can lead us to pride and self-sufficiency, while too little may lead us to despair and dishonor. True wisdom is found in being content with what God provides, recognizing that He is our sustainer. But Solomon's wisdom on moderation and balance doesn't just apply to wealth or pleasure. It extends to our relationships, our ambitions, and even our spirituality. He warns us against self-righteousness, cautioning that overzealous judgment or pride in our goodness can be just as harmful as reckless sin. A life in balance is one that values humility, that pursues wisdom and righteousness without forgetting our reliance on God's grace. So, how do we apply this wisdom of moderation and balance in our own lives? It begins with gratitude and a heart that is satisfied with what God provides. When we live in gratitude, we resist the temptation to chase what we don't have. We enjoy life's blessings without letting them define us, and we face life's challenges with a sense of peace, knowing that they too have their purpose. Balance means saying enough when the world tells us to say more. It means resting when the world says to keep pushing, and it means honoring God in both our highs and lows, seeing Him as our constant, regardless of life's changes. Knowledge. It's something we all crave. We want answers, understanding, certainty, a roadmap to life that will guide us, protect us, and help us make sense of our experiences. But Ecclesiastes delivers a sobering message. True understanding is elusive. Even the wisest king, blessed with unparalleled insight, found himself grappling with life's mysteries, realizing that no amount of human knowledge could fully reveal God's purposes. In Ecclesiastes 8:16-17, Solomon confronts this frustrating reality. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe the labor that is done on earth, people getting no sleep day or night, then I saw all that God has done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one can discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim they know, they cannot really comprehend it. Here, Solomon acknowledges that human wisdom has limits. No matter how diligently we study, plan, or analyze, some truths remain hidden, and God's ways often lie beyond our understanding. Imagine Solomon, the man who explored everything from natural science to human psychology, confessing that knowledge alone cannot satisfy our deepest questions. This wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was the recognition of a greater truth. We are finite beings trying to understand an infinite God. The pursuit of knowledge, noble as it is, ultimately reaches a point where human reason fails, where our best efforts are met with mystery rather than clarity. Solomon's words are a call to humility, reminding us that true wisdom isn't found in possessing all answers, but in accepting that some answers belong only to God. This theme in Ecclesiastes challenges a modern world obsessed with information. We live in the age of Google and artificial intelligence, where knowledge is more accessible than ever. We're conditioned to believe that if we search hard enough, we'll find an answer to every question. But even with all our advances, we're no closer to solving life's biggest mysteries, questions about purpose, suffering, morality, and the afterlife. Ecclesiastes exposes the illusion that human knowledge can provide ultimate understanding, reminding us that true peace comes not from knowing everything, but from trusting the one who who does. Solomon isn't suggesting that we reject learning or curiosity. In fact, the Bible encourages us to seek wisdom, to pursue knowledge, and to grow in understanding. Proverbs 4:7 tells us, "The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding." Knowledge is a gift from God, a tool that enables us to navigate life, to understand His creation, and to grow in relationship with Him. But Ecclesiastes reminds us that knowledge has its place. It is not our ultimate security. When we try to make it our foundation, we find ourselves frustrated because knowledge alone cannot reveal God's entire plan. This pursuit of elusive knowledge is reflected in Job's story as well. When Job, a righteous man, suffers immensely and questions God, he longs to understand why he is enduring such hardship. But instead of giving him answers, God responds with questions that reveal Job's limitations. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand." Job 38:4. God reminds Job, and us, that His ways are not ours to grasp fully. This isn't meant to demean us, but to teach us that faith isn't built on explanations, it's built on trust. We don't need to know everything because we know the one who does. Solomon also addresses the fleeting nature of human knowledge. Ecclesiastes 1:9 reminds us, "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." The wisdom of one generation is often rediscovered or relearned by the next. Our knowledge is constantly evolving, and much of what we think we know today may be overturned or expanded upon tomorrow. The pursuit of knowledge is, in a way, like trying to catch smoke in our hands. It's always moving, always shifting, and never fully ours to hold. So where does that leave us? Solomon's reflections on the elusiveness of knowledge call us to a deeper reliance on God. They teach us that faith means trusting God's wisdom, even when we can't see the whole picture. When we let go of the need to understand everything, we free ourselves to experience peace, resting in the knowledge that God's plans are perfect, even when they're hidden from us. Let me ask you, are you searching for answers that only God can provide? Are you frustrated by the mysteries that life presents? Solomon's words encourage us to shift our focus from seeking certainty to seeking God. When we find ourselves grappling with questions we can't answer, Ecclesiastes invites us to embrace the mystery, to let go of our need to control, and to trust that God's wisdom far surpasses our own. After all his searching, his questioning, and his restless pursuit of truth, Solomon ends Ecclesiastes with a single, powerful truth. Everything we do in this life matters because one day we will stand before God's throne. In Ecclesiastes 12:13-14, Solomon's final words cut to the heart of human existence. "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." After exploring every worldly pursuit, Solomon leads us to this undeniable reality. God's judgment is final, and it's the foundation upon which everything else stands. Imagine Solomon, having tasted all the pleasures of life, having amassed wealth, wisdom, power, and influence, ending his reflections on this note. He is saying, everything else fades, but what remains is our accountability before God. This is the truth that gives weight to every action, every decision, every hidden thought. The final judgment is not a distant theological concept. It's a reality that shapes how we live today. Knowing that God will judge us changes everything. It means that our choices matter deeply. It means that nothing is lost, forgotten, or overlooked. This idea of the final judgment isn't meant to instill fear but reverence. Solomon reminds us that God is just and that His judgment is thorough, covering even the hidden things. Our thoughts, intentions, and deeds, whether seen by others or not, are known by him. This is echoed throughout the scriptures. Psalm 139 verses 2 through 4 reminds us, "You know when I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." Our lives are fully transparent before God, and every action, whether public or private, holds eternal significance. It's easy in today's world to fall into the trap of thinking that our actions have no lasting consequences. We live in a culture that often minimizes accountability, encouraging us to live for ourselves, to make our own rules. But Solomon challenges this mindset, warning us that we are never truly alone in our decisions. We live before an all-seeing God, and every moment is an opportunity to either honor or dishonor him. The final judgment is a call to integrity, to live authentically in the light of God's truth, not just for appearance's sake. Ecclesiastes 3:17 echoes this solemn truth, where Solomon states, "God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed." Judgment isn't just about punishment or reward, it's about truth. It's the moment when God's holiness shines upon everything we've done, and the reality of our hearts is revealed. The righteous will find peace in God's justice, while the unrepentant will face the reality of their choices. The final judgment is God's ultimate statement on what truly matters. This perspective on judgment isn't unique to Ecclesiastes. It's woven throughout Scripture. Romans 14:12 tells us, "So then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God." And 2 Corinthians 5:10 emphasizes, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad." This is a universal truth. No one is exempt. The rich, the poor, the wise, the simple, all will stand before God, and only his assessment will matter. Solomon's conclusion calls us to live with eternity in mind, to remember that our actions have eternal significance. The fleeting pleasures of this world, the accomplishments we achieve, the wealth we amass, all these things pale in comparison to the reality of standing before God. Ecclesiastes teaches us that the life lived in reverence of God is the life that endures. The final judgment isn't something to fear if we are living in alignment with God's will. It's the promise that, in the end, righteousness will prevail and God's justice will restore order. Let's consider for a moment, what would change in our lives if we truly lived with this awareness of judgment? If we knew that every choice, every thought, every hidden deed would be laid bare before God, how would we live? The knowledge of God's judgment isn't a burden, it's a motivation to live authentically, to pursue what truly matters, and to honor him in all things. Solomon's wisdom calls us to focus not on temporary rewards, but on eternal accountability. Solomon's final call to fear God and keep his commandments is not a command out of obligation. It's an invitation to live in alignment with God's design, to live a life that reflects his truth and beauty. So after all the searching, all the questioning, and all the wisdom that God gave him, Solomon leaves us with this final instruction: fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Ecclesiastes 12:13. These are not just the closing words of Ecclesiastes, they're Solomon's answer to life's deepest questions. The meaning of life, he tells us, is simpler than we might think, not in its depth, but in its essence. To live in awe of God, to honor him, to walk humbly according to his ways, this is what gives life its true, lasting purpose. Throughout Ecclesiastes, Solomon has taken us on an unflinching journey through the human experience. He explored the pursuit of pleasure, the allure of wealth, the quest for wisdom, and the complexities of justice and judgment. He showed us the limits of human understanding and reminded us of the relentless passage of time. Yet for all his searching, Solomon arrives at a truth so profound, so deeply satisfying, that it resonates across the ages. We are created to live in relationship with God, to honor Him in everything we do. Consider this. After a lifetime of experiencing everything the world could offer, Solomon found that nothing in this world could satisfy the deepest needs of the soul. Not knowledge, not success, not pleasure, not power. All these pursuits, he realized, were like chasing the wind. They seemed to promise fulfillment, but in the end, they only left him empty. It wasn't until he returned to the source, to the one who created him, that he found what he was truly looking for. So, what does it mean to fear God? It means to live with a reverent awe, an awareness of His greatness, and a humility about our own limitations. It's acknowledging that God is sovereign, that He is wise, and that He alone holds the keys to life and death, joy and sorrow, purpose and meaning. To fear God is to trust Him fully, to surrender our desires, ambitions, and questions to His divine will, knowing that His ways are higher than our own. Solomon's wisdom calls us to center our lives around God's presence, not the pursuit of earthly rewards. To keep His commandments means to live in obedience, not because we're compelled by obligation, but because we love and honor the one who made us. It's about a relationship with God that brings both freedom and accountability, that guides our steps and gives meaning to each moment. And here's the beautiful part. When we live with God at the center, everything else falls into place. We find peace, not in answers, but in faith. We find joy, not in excess, but in the simple blessings God provides. We find meaning, not in what we achieve, but in who we are in Him. Ecclesiastes invites us to let go of the things that distract us and to embrace the life God intended for us, a life of purpose, humility, and eternal hope. So let me ask you, what are you pursuing? Are you building your life around things that will pass away, or are you seeking the one who gives life meaning? Solomon's journey through Ecclesiastes isn't just his story, it's our story too. We all wrestle with questions, we all face moments of emptiness, and we all desire a purpose that transcends the temporary. Solomon's words challenge us to let go of what is fleeting and to root our lives in what is eternal. Thank you for joining Deep Bible Stories on this journey through Ecclesiastes. Remember, the final word isn't about human understanding or worldly success. It's about reverence for God. The pursuit of a life that honors Him is the pursuit that will never disappoint. So, keep Him at the center, live with humility, and remember that in Him you have found everything you need. May God bless you as you walk in His wisdom and grace. Until next time, stay grounded in His truth and keep seeking the life that only He can provide. Stay blessed. Amen.